Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Shatreen Sawati is here and welcome to Biosciences with Shatreen Sawati. And today I'm here with my third lecture from Cell Biology series. And I have delivered the lecture about the cell theory, about the plant, animal, prokaryotic, eukaryotic cells, their comparison, and many more in my previous lectures. So, must watch all my lectures, you will get a lot. So, today I'm going to deliver the lecture about the cell membrane. But before starting my lecture, I have a very humble request to all of you. If you did not subscribe my channel, kindly subscribe my channel and promote my channel. If you are promoting my channel, you are promoting the education. So please do subscribe it and like my videos, share my videos. If you're sharing my videos, my lectures, you are sharing the knowledge. So keep watching and keep sharing knowledge with others. So now I'm going to start my lecture about the cell membrane. This is very interesting, and cell membrane, you people know that present in almost all plant, animal, prokaryotic cells, and in some, like in plant animal cells, it is the outermost boundary, and in plant cells it is present next to the cell wall. So this biological membrane, which is also known as plasma membrane or cell membrane or cytoplasmic membrane, this is very important, and all the function of the cell depend upon the presence of the cell membrane. All the transport, all the receptors, recognitions of the other things, and movement of like exocytosis, endocytosis, all. And in case of the many other processes, like in case of prokaryotes, this cell membrane act as a very important metabolic site, because in case of the prokaryote there is no you people know that cytoplasmic organelles, membrane bounded organelle like mitochondria and chloroplast, etc. So this play a very important role in energy production and many more. So now I'm going to start what is basically the structure of the plasma membrane. First of all, as you can see here in the diagram, the phospholipid bilayer, which forms a stable barrier between two aqueous compartments. What does it mean? Like, it's inside of the cell, and this is the outside of the cell. And you can see here the lipid bilayer means it consists of the two layers. So the outer compartment and the inner compartment both are aqueous. Like the cytoplasm, which is the cytosol, 90% water, and outside the membrane, extracellular fluid also contain the aqueous compartment or aqueous environment. In the case of the plasma membrane, these compartments are the inside and the outside of the cell, as you have seen here. The protein embedded within the phospholipid bilayer. Now you can see here the proteins which are present on the surface as well as inside the embedded inside the cell membrane, and all these proteins play a very important role, and they carry out the specific functions of the plasma membrane. And I will discuss all these functions and the structure of the proteins and many more. And you can also you can see here that these are the chains. These chains are made up of the carbohydrates and many more. I will discuss later on one by one. So this is the simplest structure, which consists of the bilayer, means the two layers of the phospholipids, and I will discuss the structure of the phospholipid in detail and the function of the phospholipid in detail. And you can see here the proteins. These proteins are embedded as well as present on the upper surface and the inner surface of the outer inner, both surfaces of the cell membrane, and play a very important role, which I will discuss later. Okay, now the discovery. This is very important to understand and to know the discovery of each and every organelle, each and every cell, each and every discovery, because in this way we are able to know who discovered it and in which period and how. So the studies of the red blood cells plasma membrane provided the first evidence that the biological membrane consists of the lipid bilayer. This is very important. First of all, the biological membrane or the plasma membrane was discovered in red blood cells. In 1925, the two Dutch scientists, Gotter and the Grander, extracted the membrane's lipids from a known number of the red blood cells, corresponding to a known surface area of the plasma membrane. The surface area of the lipid monolayer turned out to be twice that occupied by the erythrocyte plasma membranes, leading to the conclusion that membrane consists of lipid bilayer rather than monolayer. Is it clear? The discovery of the lipid layer membrane or plasma membrane were first in 1925 by the two Dutch scientists, Gotter and the Grendel. Now, later on, what will happen? The fluid mosaic model. That was proposed in 1972 by the Nicholson and Singer. Proposed the fluid mosaic model of the membrane structure, which is now generally accepted as the basic paradigm for the organization of all biological membrane. So this is very important to understand why it is called the fluid mosaic model. The word fluid is derived from the fluidity. And this fluidity is because of the lipids, phospholipids. As we know that the cell membrane is made up of lipids, lipid bilayer. So the fluidity is because of these lipids. You can see this is the lipid bilayer. The fluidity is because of this. And the mosaic is a pattern in which the proteins scattered outside, inside, and also embedded in the cell membrane. Now the concept clear about the fluid mosaic model. So the proteins float in the sea of the lipids. This fluidity is provided by the phospholipids, lipid bilayer, and the mosaic pattern is because of the presence of the scattering of the proteins. So in this model, membranes are viewed as a two-dimensional fluid in which proteins are inserted into the lipid bilayer. Is it clear? Fluid mosaic model. You can also note down and also can observe here the fluid mosaic pattern of the proteins and the lipids. Note down the information about the discovery, about the fluid mosaic model, about the structure of the cell membrane on your notebook, and it will be helpful in your exams and also helpful in your different tests for universities and medical colleges. Okay, now here you can see the clear figure of the fluid mosaic model in which the two layers of the lipids, which are known as the phospholipids, in which proteins are embedded, and you can see here the cholesterol and many oligosaccharides chains and many more, which I will discuss later on. So this is the concept of the fluid mosaic model, in which the phospholipids act like the sea of the lipids in which proteins float, which give the fluid mosaic model. Because of the fluid mosaic, that's why it is called fluid mosaic, because of the pattern of the protein scattering and the fluidity of the lipids. Okay. Now the biochemistry. What is the composition of the cell membrane? Now we are going to learn the biochemistry. The plasma membrane of animal cell contain 4 major phospholipids. Must keep it in your mind. The phospholipids, 4 types of phospholipids. Number 1, phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidyl ethanolamine, phosphatidyl serine, and sphingomyelin. 4 types of phospholipids. And phospholipid, you know that this is the very important type of the lipid, which is made up of the fatty acids and the phosphate group. So phospholipids, which are the most important type of the lipids, there are 4 types of phospholipids present in the cell membrane. They are phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidyl ethanolamine, phosphatidyl serine, and sphingomyelin. Beside the phospholipids, you can see here the cholesterol and proteins and carbohydrates are also present. Protein account for about 50% of the composition by mass. Lipids of all type account for about 40% of the composition by mass, and 10% other like cholesterol, proteins, and carbohydrates. So this is the basic information about what? About the chemical composition or biochemistry of the cell membrane. You also note down all these important information on your notebook. Now I'm moving towards the phospholipid. I will discuss now phospholipid and protein one by one. So first of all, I'm going to show you the structure of the phospholipids. Phospholipid basically consists of, you can see this is the lipid bilayer membrane. Okay, this is the extracellular environment and this is the intracellular. Both extra and intra are aqueous compartments. So this phospholipid membrane consists of, if you see the structure of one phospholipid, as you can see here, this consists of the head and the tail. This is the head, which contains the phosphate group, and this is the tail, which contains the carbon chain, hydrocarbon chain. Now, the head is hydrophilic. Head is hydrophilic and the tail is hydrophobic. Must keep it in your mind. The two lipid membrane, bilayer membrane, phospholipid membrane, sandwich like the hydrophobic tail remain inside. And you can see here the space between the two membrane, intracellular space. Intermembrane space, sorry. This is the intermembrane space. So the intramembrane space is, you can see here, this chain of the tails of all the phospholipid, this is hydrophobic. And the head, which contains the phosphate group, is hydrophilic. Is it clear? Now this structure prevent the cell membrane to dissolve in the aqueous compartment on both sides. And this hydrophilic head because this is hydrophilic mean polar. So the polar molecules and water and many more transport through the cell membrane easily. So hydrophilic head allow the polar substances to move in and outside of the cell, and the hydrophobic tail. Hydrophilic means water loving, means polar. Hydrophobic mean hydro mean water, phobic mean hating. Philic mean loving, phobic mean hating. So hydrophobic mean they are non-polar. Is it clear? Hydrophobic mean they are non-polar, do not dissolve in the water. But hydrophilic dissolve means interact with the water and other polar substances. So the hydrophilic nature of the phospholipid allow the movement of all the polar substances, and this hydrophobic nature prevent it from dissolving, means give the stability to the cell membrane. Is it clear to you? So that's why Allah created the cell membrane in this way. The outer surface is made up of the hydrophilic head, and the inner, which provide the stability to the cell membrane, is hydrophobic. How beautifully Allah created the cell membrane, which is very important in performing the different functions of the cell membrane, and also maintain the shape of the cell. Otherwise, the cell shape will be disturbed if the cell membrane destroy. So the proteins. Singer and Nicholson distinguished two classes of proteins associated with the phospholipids. Bilayer membrane, there are two types. Number one, you can see here, peripheral proteins. And the second one is integral proteins. First one, peripheral. Peripheral mean outer. And integrals, which are integrated, which are embedded in here. So the integral proteins, you can see here, which act like sometimes like the channels, sometimes like the pumps, and the peripheral, which are present on the outer surface, which act like the receptors of the cells. These peripheral integral proteins performing many functions. Some help in the transport of the substances across the cell membrane, inside and outside of the cell. And the peripheral proteins, which form the conjugated molecules with the, you can see here, many glycolipids and glycoproteins and many more. So these proteins, which are the peripheral proteins, act as a receptor for the outer environment. So all these proteins, either they are peripheral, they are integral, they play a very important role in transport as well as the recognition, as well as the receptor, act as a receptor for many substances which are present outside of the cell. So inshallah, in my next lecture, I will discuss in detail about the conjugated molecule which are present on the surface of the cell membrane in the form of the glycolipids, glycoprotein, their function, inshallah. So thank you very much. If you have any question, kindly write in the comment box, and keep watching, keep sharing my lectures with others. So Allah Hafiz, I will be back tomorrow.